Lord Mayor, dear friends, Michael, it seems almost redundant to launch a book which is already a howling success, but here goes anyway. I think every visionary politician and poet has one dirty little secret, and Michael D's is that he was actually Ireland's first karaoke singer. One of my earliest memories is of Michael putting on his Edith Piaf record, his vinyl record, in his house in Renmore during the election of 1973, and lustily singing Je ne regrette rien. Now, he was little over 30 at the time, and I told him it was a bit young to be engaging in such reckless retrospection, and he threatened me with Sinatra's My Way if I didn't. And then he said, I always remember this, oh no, Kiberd, if you want the full emotional whack, I'll give it to you. And he put on Yesterday Once More by the Carpenters. When I was young, I listened to the radio waiting for my favourite song. When they played, I sang along. Not much has changed. Every sha-la-la-la, etc. Now, I had been, during the previous day, preaching social democracy a la Michael D. to some farmers in Indrawan and Kosla. I noticed actually as they came out of the church, every second one of them bought a copy of the News of the World, which in those days in the Gaeltacht was called An Pauper Kraken. Not much has changed, every sha-la-la-la. My roommate from Trinity, who was a public school boy named Robert Law, now alas not with us, he had spent the same day working for Michael in the Claddagh. And I think between the pair of us in that election, we cost this good man at least 1,000 votes. Trinity students telling the people of Galway West what was good for them. A few years later, when we stopped canvassing for him, he was effortlessly elected. So I feel very, very nervous launching this book. The last time I launched the book for Michael, he wasn't running for anything. I remember also asking Brendan Halligan, because I wasn't, and never have been, now or ever, a member of the Labour Party, was Michael on the left wing or the right wing of the Labour Party? And he laughed and said, no, Michael is the president of the transcendental wing. I remember rebuking him, not just for his Carpenter's record, but he also had a Nana Muscuri record. And he turned on me and gave me the ultimate karaoke, which was a quote from Yeats on the students of the National University who had joined the agitation against immoral literature. Where but here have pride and truth that long to give themselves for wage and shake their wicked sides at youth, restraining reckless middle age. There was always a touch of the artist about Michael D. And when he finally came to serve his constitutional sentence on the backbenches of our Dáil, I remember him whiling away some very tedious debates on land bills by reading through the early novels of Thomas Mann. I think in these poems he has unerringly recreated the lost world of his childhood. A rural Ireland of high nelly bicycles and relatives assisting. The child of Mary Meadow was a consolation and would travel with them to the grave. And in the room guaranteed you could prepare your black and save shillings from sales of eggs and butter for porter at your wake. Relatives assisting, they called you on the forms. You had no acres, no lovers, no children, but you had what was more important, a room in the house and a seat in the car to mass, and in the meantime, your high nelly bicycle and your prayers. And he also creates the world of disillusioned freedom fighters, his own father included, men who once said revolution or death and then faced the death of their revolution. It's a world also made familiar to us in prose by McGahern. And Michael evokes it with a kind of reverence for its good souls, an eloquent indignation at its social inequality, and I think the kind of attention which is itself a form of prayer and can only come from real love. You have stern schoolmasters and parish priests walking again in these pages, but some of the images are troubled, but in each of them the author recognizes himself. He says we make our own uncertain magic. And what I think is that Michael D's words heal the pain that they often describe so well by the act of description. And it's because he believes that literature has a kind of utopian ideological surplus, that every culture contains not just the present moment, but unused potentials which will map our way into the future. And I think what impresses in the collection is what has impressed many young people who have watched Michael D. Higgins's final speech to the Dáil on YouTube, and I know many people in the room have. A noble, candid eloquence, an imaginative audacity, a sharp intellectual analysis, a depth of feeling, but most of all a sense of the dignity of everyday life, that ordinary people can and still do extraordinary things. Michael writes beautifully in a more contemporary vein of the challenges of his own family life, the feeling of handing your children over at a school, the stress faced by children doing exams, of being a father and a husband and a brother. And he seamlessly joins, as Sean said, the personal and the social. And he shows how public forces don't just invade our lives, but can also sometimes uplift them. Some of the moments are very tender. At one point he writes as a father, looking at the intricacy of a baby's toe and seeing in that a hope for the future. And there are other hilarious moments, for instance, a wonderful, surreal, ironic poem called Jesus Appears in Dublin in 1990 at the Port and Docks Board site. On that one, all I can say is we need a second coming. And one can only hope in the surreal context that Durkin has occasion to revise one of his own famous choruses and say, start making love outside Oris and out the Run. Michael in the poem celebrates the thinkers and the processes of thought, the artists and the forms that they make. And he enacts with his own children a generous, open dialogue about the relation between the generations. He knows that children, like poems, are signals which we send into an uncertain future. And I think the book, of course, contains many well-known poems from his earlier volumes, but also new ones, and very valuable contextualizations of all that work. And I think in a way the book is addressed most of all to the young, because they have grown up in a world where everything from bus services to medical insurance has been privatized, and in which poetry and consciousness have also been remorselessly privatized. It wasn't always like this. The best-selling book in 1894 in this country was a volume of poems and songs called Auron Gra Coiga Connacht, published by the young Douglas Hyde. And its success filled even Yeats with envy, especially when Yeats heard haymakers in a field reciting Hyde's words, not knowing that the man who passed in the long black coat was actually the author of the words themselves. And when the cultural revival, led by Yeats and Hyde, helped to create this independent state, one of its first government ministers, Desmond Fitzgerald, appeared in a book of Imagist poems alongside writings by Pound, H.D. and Richard Aldington. And when the Irish Senate met for the first time, one poet in it, Gogarty, said that they wouldn't be sitting there at all but for the poems of W.B. Yeats. So I think Shelley was right when he said poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. Much more right than the cynical person who answered and said such a description better fits the special police. But people don't remember what Shelley added. He said that that power was acknowledged least often by the poets themselves. Too often the personal voice of the poet causes people to think of poetry as a hopelessly private affair, as if sensitive souls set out in youth to change the world and then end up just defending a beleaguered sensibility. Yet every now and again a writer emerges in this country who understands the old bardic idea, to act out an interpretation of the relation between a regime and its people. In the bardic world, if a ruler were wise and good, the poet said that the land was bountiful and redeemed by beneficent rule. If not, the artist could point to the flaws. But the capacity to bless and to curse was a central part of the relation. And the ultimate authority of the poet was found in the fact that he handed over the wand of investiture to the ruler. And I think something of that symbolic ritual remains in the office of the Irish presidency. Today it's the Parliament, not the Prince, who's sovereign. But still the President is elected to interpret the relation between those rulers and the people. So I end with some questions. What if the file and the fla were one and the same person? What if authority itself, no longer distinguished from raw power, was itself visionary? What if the love that binds people together took the place of raw, brute economic power? And a leader again had the audacity to state spiritual values rather than simply follow the received opinions of focus groups. Perhaps these poems are one roadmap to a reinvented Ireland of the future. Michael D., thank you for them and thank you for everything.